we will just start by advising everybody present that this is a public meeting and it's being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. Item number 1, declarations of interest. Don't think we've had one yet in all our meetings. That's great. We'll move on to number 2, apologies for absence and substitutes.
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Newstead with Councillor Berry as a substitute, Councillor Goodman, Councillor Tipple, Councillor Toval and Councillor Bullman with Councillor Nurdin as substitute.
Thank you. Welcome to the substitutes. I think it's actually a really important meeting to have subs out if possible because of the questions that are being answered. So it's really good sort of insight for the forthcoming debates about the budget. Minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting held on the 7th of January. Do we have any comments on them? No, we'll assume that they're all fine. Announcements, other than noticing that the room has got smaller, and we did agree it would go bigger, I've just mentioned that here, because when everyone is here last time, we were a bit squeezed in. I know you were a bit squeezed in on that corner last time. You were sort of having to share microphones and things, but perhaps we could note that it would be just better if we could go a little bit bigger, just not to be sat right on each other's laps for the best part of 2 hours sometimes. Nothing other than that, so okay, we get to item number 5, public speaking. Okay, item number 6, the budget questions from for Cabinet. I will request that we assume that they have been read, because we do not want to turn this into a, well, being a primary school teacher, very much a sort of guided reading session, you know, with me leading it from the front or someone reading it all out. We can avoid that as much as possible. I'll do that during the day. So what we want really are supplementary questions or further clarification on any questions which you feel might be brief or just don't quite make sense. And let's assume, without me being pointing a finger at anyone, perhaps pointing at myself, that sometimes we aren't the experts in the room on these things, and there's not such a thing as a bad question. If you want clarification, and these are really important decisions that we're having to make regarding the budget, any question really is a good question as long as it's not the same question that's already been asked. So, who would like to kick us off by asking a question? I'm looking in Fran's direction because usually it's going to start with Fran. Go on, Fran.
Thank you, Chairman. Happy to. There was, well, question 2 here was around the Bure Valley Railway and bridges. I don't really feel like the question's been answered, really. You said, the question is what conversations have been undertaken. It doesn't say that. It doesn't even suggest that any are going to take place. So it would be good to know what conversations had taken place or will be planned for the future. Thank you.
I think what we'll do is, rather than stack up a load of questions in particular, I think it'd be good if we then get a question and then answer it as soon as possible. I know Martin, I thought Martin would have come in on the Bure Valley Rally, because I think that's usually your particular...
My particular one. Stolen my thunder.
I know, I'm just thinking how dare you kept it under control really well. Who would like to attempt to answer the question regarding the Bure Valley Railway? I'm looking at the back table in particular, or to the side. Ooh, no one's volunteering at this point. Is there anybody who could... Oh, yes. Leader, too.
No, I was just going to say, it comes under Martin's portfolio. I'd suggest Martin.
Yeah, so I've just tried to turn my thing on, which has happened now. And I may bring George in as well, because obviously we work on this together. We have been talking to Bure Valley Railway ever since I became portfolio holder. They're not the easiest people to deal with. We are in conversation with them over a new lease. There's been a hold-up because of a planning problem with a level crossing. That is now in the process of being solved. Once that has been solved, we should hopefully then be entering into a new lease. The bridges are a completely different situation. They are our statutory responsibility, and there is absolutely no way that we can get out of it. We are having them reassessed at the moment to get an up-to-date view of how bad or good they are, but there is no way of getting out of that maintenance. I think I'll just get George just to confirm that, but that's the situation as I see it. We have been talking to them, and we're beginning to get somewhere. It's taking a long time, but the bridges, there's nothing you can do about.
Yeah, thank you. Just to echo some further points that are made in the answer to the question. Of course, there is a formal relationship between Broadland District Council and the Bure Valley Railway Limited in that there is a contract to lease, and that sets out terms and obligations. To vary those terms and obligations would need a new lease, and that would require both parties to agree to those terms. Of course, both parties will be interested in achieving different things or separate things, and until both parties are agreed on what those terms and conditions would look like, that will not change. But of course, we have regular communications with the Bure Valley Railway Limited as responsible landowners and leaseors, and of course, in making sure that we're meeting our obligations for repair and maintenance along the path. Happy to answer any further questions.
Martin.
Thank you. That does sort of lead into my question around the bridge repairs and the current state of where we are, because I know that when we undertook the previously, and there was a schedule, and there was the red, amber, green on the ones that needed doing now, the ones that needed something but were planned in. And I know that Phil Courtier was quite up to date on where we were with the state of those. And I know there was an issue around as and when the contractors could actually get on site to do the work, and I think that was at the behest of Norfolk County Council, if I remember correctly. And again, just by the nature of it, when it was done 4 to 5 years ago, I would expect that some of the items which were on the green or the amber have now moved to the red and the amber, and therefore it's just understanding the liability that it's still there.
Do we think there's I guess the core point there is there a growing liability through work not being done, do we believe, or is that something which is part of the negotiations and the discussions?
The bridges will, of course, require maintenance throughout the rest of their useful lives. We have there is some legislative requirements that we need to meet in terms of surveying those, and there's some complexity about what those surveys look like depending on the age and condition of the bridge. Rest assured, we're meeting all of our obligations. We're undertaking a review of all the bridges in advance of that time period, so well in advance, to make sure we're best placed to understand what the likely spend is over the short, medium and longer term. And of course, so then we can act on any remedial work that might need to be undertaken. But it will just be reviewed every so often as per the conditions that we need to meet.
Apologies if I may come back. That doesn't necessarily answer the question I asked. I understand what George is saying, but again, at the time there was a delay, so there were already a schedule of works, and it's where we are on the schedule of works that was already in Tran, rather than any future work, when we understand the nature of our obligation, but it's whether or not that work has been done, and now is the cost increasing more in line. So again, the work that was already in Tran was a given cost. Now, with cost rising, there'll be an expected additional cost.
The only thing I'll say probably in relation to this is that it's about this year's budget rather than a deep dive into the potential future budget areas, but I'll just give George a chance to comment on that.
Yeah, apologies for not answering the question directly. So yes, the red and amber items in those work schedules from surveys undertaken years ago, most of that work has been completed or reassessed to not be amber or red, depending on other works that have been undertaken. So a number of bridges have had remedial work, additional barriers installed, etc., etc. Parapets have been fixed up and shored up where appropriate, and lots of vegetation has been cleared where required, because of course there are lots of factors that affect bridges. So yes, that work has been undertaken.
Happy with that, Martin? Yeah, or happier. Happier, thank you. And I'll put on record, I think Bure Valley Railway is one of the absolute gems of Broadland. I love it. I've been on it so many times with my children. I recommend people to go on it, and anybody who is tuned in, make use of it, because it's fantastic just a fantastic thing, everything about it, I think. So, Grant.
I hope it's working. Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Riley, question number 8. If I read the response, recent change to the national insurance contributions will cost BDC approximately $250,000 a year. However, the government have indicated that this would be compensated in the final settlement. So then I go to the response to question number 19, and it says the provisional local government finance settlement for 25-26 was announced on the 18th of December. And I read further that BDC will be getting 338,000 less in core government grant in 25-26 than it did in 24-25. So can I get a little bit of clarity on whether the government is going to cover the cost of, or the increased cost in the local, in the national insurance contributions?
Chair. Yeah, the answer that's given here is actually pretty accurate. The situation at the moment is that we've made an allocation in the budget to cover this from our revenue because the government had announced, have been making announcements, they will compensate. However, what we've had is the provisional settlement so far, and that's a provisional settlement. So the final settlement that we will get through, we haven't got that yet. And then when we get that, this always happens last knockings. I think last year, Rodney will recall as well, we got the final settlement, I think it was 2 days before the council setting meeting budget on at that particular time, sorry, 2 days before, and we adjusted the budget on the last knockings at the meeting, which was 104,000. We got an extra 1% just 2 days before the actual council tax setting budget. We set up from that 104,000 the special opportunity reserve, which we've used to good extent so far. So that's where it is provisional. It's not finally there yet.
It wouldn't be a meeting with Steve if he didn't leave his microphone on after he'd spoken. Jonathan, you'd like to ask something?
Yeah, looking at question 3 regarding the car parking policy, I know we have worked on this at Economic Success Policy panel. Just my question, I guess, is for Steve as well, just to say, I understand that this is still being worked on, because obviously that's what the answer is, but have we put it in, is there a budgeted amount for this next year? Because obviously we could be working on it for the next couple of months, and then we'd need a budget for it when it came to working on it after April. So I'm just, the question is, I know it's being worked on, but is there a budget for it?
Yeah, we've got a budget set aside every year for car parking. Under previous administration, under other administration, and there'll be a budget put forward in budget papers for maintenance of the car parks for this forthcoming year, 25-26. As for policy, as to what is going to happen around car parking charging or not, whatever, that is still yet to be looked at during the course of the year. But of course, we have to set a budget for maintenance anyway, and there is a budget. There will be a budget line in the budget submission that we give on the 20th of February. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to Martin, then Grant.
Sorry, just as an... just as a supplementary to that, again, at the time when the car park repairs were done, that was quite a huge cost. And again, what the portfolio holder alluded to, and in answer to the question, is the ongoing maintenance now. But at the time when we did it, I stipulated and said we should be having a fund put aside for the future costs that could be incurred in 10, 15 years' time, depending on how long the surface had arisen, and has that been provided for?
Steve?
Yeah, I think we are straying a little bit from the intentions of what this whole session is supposed to be about, Nick. I can't actually answer this without talking about the past. So the previous budgets that were set up around this were all maintenance budgets, and within those maintenance budgets, year on year when they were set, there was simply not enough money being put aside to repair the particular car park that's being mentioned here in Elsham, and it built up. The repairs that needed to be done to that, substantial ones, over a period of about 10 years actually, that weren't being able to be carried out because the budget was not sufficient enough to carry those repairs out. So what we did in our administration, under a surplus that we had come in within the first 3 months, surplus over and above the preset budget from the previous administration, was used part of that windfall money to put that situation right in Elsham, which was substantial because the situation had built up. What we're now doing is we're setting out budgets, which again will have maintenance budgets, and proportionately estimated in terms of where we think the maintenance is going to be over the next 5 years, which is the provisions that we normally set up for within a council, any council, bearing in mind that we've now got the car parks in a very good state of being, so to speak, to say the least. So I think with the engineering reports we had and what we've done in particular with that particular car park, the budgets that we're setting aside will be adequate over the next 5 years. And of course, if we are here in 5 years' time to operate such a budget, which of course is something else which we can't talk about today. But thank you, Chair.
Grant?
Thank you again, Chairman. If I can just go to question 17, where it talks about Broadland growth. The middle question is, how much has Broadland growth cost the council this year? And the response talks about is it is a separate company, does not directly fund any of their operating costs. However, there is one officer that is employed by the company that utilises, I don't know whether that person is on the payroll or uses the payroll services of Broadland, but potentially also maybe using some of the services and facilities of the council. In other words, does actually cost something to this council. When I think about it in the bigger picture, Broadland Growth is not the only company that has these sort of costs, because we have the Norfolk Environmental Credits Company. We also have Broadland Living, which the officers that work, I know that the person in charge of the Norfolk Environmental Credits Company is being paid through Broadland, our payroll, which is the facility for that. So if we're asking a question, how much is it costing the council? That's the sort of response I would want to know. How much is it actually costing us through the facilities, not necessarily. And if it does cost, do we get some sort of compensation for them utilising the services of the council or the facilities of the council?
I guess we're asking the appropriate person whether there's some sort of income stream the council gets to cover its costs.
Yes. Well, I think you're absolutely clear that Broadland Growth funds its own resources. If we are providing any services via the council, they are charged to Broadland Growth, as I understand it. I don't know the exact figures. I also think I'm assuming that we're not asking about people having a coffee or whatever. But I think we also need to bear in mind, because it ranged across Norfolk Environmental Credits as well. So I think, you know, partly what we ought to be thinking about here is what services are those companies necessarily offering to the council? So it's not just, it's a reciprocal arrangement as well. So I think, to be fair, we are very clear that the council is not paying over and above anything to fund those organisations. Those organisations actually have brought money back to the council, and I would include Broadland Growth in that. So there is no actual cost, and I think I'm fairly comfortable that the answer we've given is an accurate one. Thank you.
I was just going to ask a question relating to, if I can find my own scribbled notes. Thorpe Lodge. Obviously, we've got the cost being explained there of 70,000 a year based on utility costs and all the ongoing maintenance of the things. The building itself is probably a depreciating asset, given the fact that people don't want office space these days. People don't really want to move into there. Have we, obviously within this is a budget for this year, so this is this year's budget, I know we're discussing, but the implications of the longer it stays on our books, I guess the less this asset is worth. Have we, without wanting to preempt anything, have we got anything that's in the pipeline for how we're going to deal with that, or is it just simply something which we're going to have to address when we come to it?
Yeah, so it does, at the moment, it does cost us 70,000 a year based on those utility costs, and clearly we've budgeted for that. We are re-advertising it. We've also done some pre-app work on that. So there is a new brochure, as it were, coming out with some ideas about how people might be able to use it. We did look at it for Broadland Growth. Unfortunately for the council, it wasn't something that they could fund via the Broadland Growth property. It actually could be quite a difficult site to develop. So it is quite clear it isn't, it isn't going to fetch as much money as perhaps might have been hoped, but I think that was fairly clear right from the outset. It is a listed building in part, so we do have a responsibility to make sure it stays looked after, and that is what we're doing, so it is managed. And as I say, we are looking at it as a redevelopment opportunity now, and we're hoping, we have had 1 or 2 expressions of interest, and I think having gone out with a new brochure and a new revamp for it, I think that we have some hope that that will actually start to bear some fruit. We have also, I would just say, and I don't know that this is going to come up, but we have explored whether there's an opportunity for Broadland Growth to work with any other builder or any other way in which we could bring this forward more quickly. And I have to say, it's not looking as if that's really an option that's available to us. But we looked at every possible option, I can assure you. And I think perhaps we'll wait and see what this new brochure and proposals do for us. But we have had some expressions of interest, so that at least is looking better.
Can I just also add, Nick, as well, Sue's absolutely correct about that, but we spent quite a lot of time on this, on viability, and the other issue is that the new, it's being re-advertised, remarketed. Part of that remarketing is pre-application. So the other thing we did was, it's not pre-application, I don't think I actually mentioned pre-application. Oh, right, okay. Sorry, I've missed that, but if Sue mentioned pre-application, we spent the money on that as well, so there is a site there now that might be, more potential to. So I didn't pick up that you said pre-application, so sorry.
Thank you. Anybody else? Martin.
So, on number 9, regarding the Frettenham Depot and refurbishment progress, was the answer does say about the amount of work cost that would be carrying into 25-26 at 475. What it didn't say was whether or not the project is on track, because it did ask, is the refurbishment progressing, but also knowing budget costs often increase, and I know that we'd already had a substantial increase by the time the final paper came forward. So of the original agreed cost that was given, how are we on track with that, and will there be any budgetary pressure on the Frettenham Depot?
Yeah, thanks very much for the question. So I think as the answer says, we've had some issues in terms of asbestos and dealing with that, which required specialist removal, so that delayed things slightly. Although other works was able to continue on the site at the same time. Work is moving ahead. It's progressing nicely. We've got a date for completion. It's within the budget originally identified. So we're quite optimistic about completing that work and moving into the new depot in May.
Can I just ask on the question 22, with a question about temporary accommodation? I mean, the savings that the council has achieved in consideration of what it would have cost us without the changes made up to this point are enormous. I mean, we're talking about saving there £700,000. And I know you've explained that council continues looking into these things, and I know these things are always brought to ONS, so we're quite well aware of that. Anything you could tantalise us with in terms of anything on the horizon for anything else that we're looking at, or without giving too much away?
I think the answer is going to have to be no, because I'm not going to give away any information before things have been fully scoped out. There's always lots of talk about business cases here, aren't there? So if anything is going to come forward, there will be a full business case for it. But essentially, nothing is off the table. And I'm really proud of our officers who always think outside the box. It's listed there what we're looking at. We'll keep looking, but what we've done has really mitigated the cost. Yes, there's lots of money has been spent on TA, but had we not done that, it would have been spent multiple times more on bed and breakfast and things like that. So what we've done, the work has had an effect. And I'm really pleased with that, but I can't go into any other details about potentials because, well, other people are listening. I'm not going to give everything away. Thank you.
Fran.
Thank you, Chairman. On that point, I think it's really important to say, obviously, you said about the savings that we have made, and we knew this was an ongoing issue, and it's not going away anytime soon. And I just wondered if within the budget, and this is asking very clearly about the budget, is we did have earmarked reserves for purchase of temporary accommodation. So we obviously still have some money in that reserve. Is there any plans to move any money within earmarked reserves to bolster that, so that we're in a position to buy properties, if that's the plan, as and when opportunities arise? Thank you.
Steve, is that something for you?
And Rodney are looking a little puzzled at the moment because there wasn't an earmarked reserve for purchasing TA properties, and Rodney's sort of indicating with me as well what we did when we purchased on the LHF for the properties that we have purchased, and indeed the agreement to purchase 3 more TA, is we took finance from the Broadland Growth pot because it had direct bearing in terms of the housing issue and et cetera, et cetera. So that's where we had to utilise that money from. And indeed, there was provisionally 7 million, which was being put aside for Broadland Growth. That then went down to 5 million, all part and parcel of what we've been purchasing. So there wasn't a specific reserve for TA for purchasing property. If we go ahead and purchase more TA property, which we can't really discuss at the moment, we're still working up papers around this, then again we will be looking to where we can find that capital, and it will be within the capital that we currently have. But there is no specific reserve for that. I think, Rodney, would you concur with that?
Yes, I'd agree that last time we took it from the Broadland Growth Reserve. I'm not aware of a specific reserve that's been set up specific to buy TA accommodation.
And we'll go via the microphone so people at home can hear. Obviously, there's some disagreement about where budgets. I know there were lots of budgets. There were some obviously some budgets which were closed down because there were some empty budgets which had sat there for some time unused. I know that there were lots. So let's not get into this. Let's all agree that we're all quite happy that this money has been spent, and it seems to be at least there's space to quickly, or there's the capacity to quickly move on budgets should an opportunity arise, which hopefully, just your comment, did you want to say something, Sue?
Yeah, I think I was just going to say, I think when we first came, Harvard Court was one of those examples that was purchased, and I believe even that money was taken from the Broadland growth budget at the time and originally proposed by the previous one.
We'll have to go with the answers that have been given, and we can get clarity on that at another point. So that's not necessarily the point of discussion here. The only other thing which came up on this was, well, relating to that, I mean, council's doing a good job. It does seem a shame when we've been told by ministers that one of the reasons for looking to abolish hundreds of, tens of district councils across the country is because of their inability to deal with temporary accommodation. That council's proving that they've been really good with doing that, and still we're getting threatened with the same axe that's been wielded to other councils who have not been as careful or as thoughtful in their preparations for dealing with this. But then you can equally look at the budget proposal or budget settlement we've got from central government and go, well, perhaps defunding councils is also another way of showing that, and there seems to be an element of defunding us, but with having that minus 338,000 settlement, which just doesn't seem fair on us as well when we're doing everything we possibly can. But anyway, that's me getting on my hobby horse and now getting off. Is there anything else that anyone else would like to raise? Well, thank you very much. I think we'll let everyone pause at this point and say thank you. Unless there's anybody who would like to add anything from Cabinet or say anything they wanted to say to us which has been missed, I can see them all shaking their heads and going, no, we're happy with that. Thank you very much to everybody who is here for that element of the meeting. We've got all those points summarised beautifully by people at the front here feverishly writing down those notes. It says that on my amended one that we would lost my correct short abbreviation, that we would request the committee consider the Cabinet responses to the budget questions and ask members if they had any further questions or comments. So there's no actual vote to be taken on that. We've just made the point that we've asked the questions and we've got answers to them. Thank you very much. I do think it was the right decision we made 2 or 3 meetings ago when we said, rather than just picking out the questions we wanted answering, the main ones, just get them all answered. I think that's far better that we went down that route. We were going to cherry pick some questions and we said just go for all of them, because then it's made this meeting a little bit shorter than it might have been otherwise. Thank you very much indeed. We'll move on to item number 7, the Member Ward Grant and Community Grant Scheme 2023-24 review, and that is going to be led by Dan, Community Enablement Manager. Thank you. Oops.
That's right. Well, there we go. Right, good evening all. Thank you, Chair. This is the annual reporting of the Member Ward Grant. It is a summary of spend and includes other member spending. So for the first time, the Community Grant Scheme after that was utilised for the first time in 2023-24. It's a relatively straightforward report. Hopefully you've all had a chance to have a look at it, mostly because officers are effectively the administrators of the grant. It is member-led funding, and it is therefore up to members to spend within the ground rules as they've agreed, and for members to scrutinise those accordingly. But within that year of 23-24, the member ward budget was £47,000 in total, and £41,396.19, nice exact figure for you, was spent across 72 projects, all of which met the ground rules as agreed. The underspend of just over £5,500 was carried forward into the community grant scheme for the 24-25 year. There is a summary of all the different projects that were funded and by whom that can be checked. Equally, we had the community grant scheme for the first year. There was a pot of £50,000 available for that. 11 applications were submitted, totalling just over £100,000. The panel met and allocated 7 projects funding. 3 received full funding and a further 4 were part funding, which exhausted the fund. And again, there's a summary within the appendix for that. Again, all met the ground rules. I think the panel learned from the process of the first year, made some adjustments that then went into 24-25, and will do so again, learning each year as it develops. But it was good to see so many projects come forward and go to good use within communities. I mean, that's essentially the summary. So if there are any questions, probably easiest just move straight to that.
Thank you. Has anybody got anything they'd like to ask? Fran.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to ask a question, Dan, around the, obviously we started up a new fund, you know, £50,000, but we already had the Community Heart Lottery grant fund. I just wondered where that is and what that's doing. I know it's not, you know, within this paper as such, but I just, because obviously that was, well, in place of previously before the 50,000. So I just wondered what additional sort of projects it was supporting, you know, and really was there a need for the 50,000, I suppose, really. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Community Heart Lottery is still in operation. It is working quite successfully. There's a number of groups that are, I guess the main part for the Community Heart Lottery is groups themselves are the direct beneficiary. So by signing up, they have that trickle income that comes through. We as an organisation are making money from that. I think it kind of is roughly between £8,000 and £10,000 a year coming in, of which that is effectively funding the Get It Started and Keep It Going grant. So what that is supporting is micro grants effectively of around up to around £300 to really kind of hit those grassroots groups for very small amounts of money to get projects off the ground effectively. And we're seeing that well utilised every year. Most, not quite all of the money is being spent each year, which we're then able to carry forward. And if we are building a bit of a surplus in there, we can look at that and where there may be a spend and whether it supports, these members can kind of make that decision on whether it supports one of the member-led funding or something else. But yeah, it's really, there's a lot of projects. We're looking to put a summary on the website of the various funds and the projects they're supporting, so it's a bit easier to see. But the money's flying out and it's doing really well for that, I have to say.
I thought when we started, we were bringing in about 40,000 a year. I thought from memory on the Community Heart Grant Lottery, and I thought it was significantly more than £8,000 to £10,000. So, which is why, you know, obviously we did have an argument. I'm not going to get into that political argument, but we did have an argument whether there was a necessity for the 50,000 to be put in place. And I've not seen anything pushing the Community Heart sort of lottery for some time, really. Well, I personally get it because I pay into it and I support a couple of charities. But it doesn't seem anything we're really pushing as a council. I just wondered if we could and generate more money for, you know, good causes. It was a question, really. So I'm slightly off, Chairman. So please bear with me. But I think it's connected because, you know, it's all money that goes to good causes around Broadland. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a communications plan. It probably needs a little look at. I've not checked recently, but the idea is that every quarter at least something goes out. We certainly try and celebrate on social media when there are prizes won and use that as a kind of hook to push the groups. But I think certainly some more probably could be done, and I can take that up with the communications team as to how we look to do that. I'll have to check the figures with the 40,000 because I don't recall seeing that. I'm not going to challenge it because I don't know, but I know certainly over the last couple of years it's been kind of, I think the highest I've seen was 12,000, but I'll check that and come back to you.
Shane.
Thanks, Chair. Two questions. A lot of the submissions were refused on the grounds that there wasn't sufficient money in the budget for this year. So are those projects that were refused because of a lack of funds permitted to resubmit? And if so, does the amount of money exceed next year's budget?
Projects that have been refused can be resubmitted, but I think it's 2 years if they're the exact same project, if they've adjusted or not. I'll double check the ground rules to make sure of that. But they can come back in. It might just be a period of time that they're limited for within the ruling on it. If they all came back in, potentially it would. The first year was kind of double the budget. The second year, I can't remember off the top of my head what CAF was this, CGS was this year in terms of total amount come through. I mean, I guess the answer to that is projects move on, don't they? Some things are timely and needed at the time, so they won't. It's unlikely that all of them would come back round the following year, but it is possible that some might.
Thank you, Chair. I completely support the community grant scheme. I think it's a brilliant initiative. On your report here, what the decisions that were refused, the reason for recommendation is a standard statement for each one, exactly the same. Would it not be worth putting the reason why they were refused for future people to look at it and think, well, maybe I can't do it because of this and that?
Yeah, the panel has a selection of kind of responses to choose from, to work from, but I think that it is possible for feedback to be taken from the panel members, and certainly if they're speaking to officers directly afterwards, the panel can look at how they respond and make judgments as to whether they want to give more detail within that. And I suspect that will be something that will be reviewed going forward for next year's.
Cabinet member would like to, I'm going to ask Natasha, then Steve.
Yeah, thank you. As chair of the panel, just to give it a bit of clarity, when projects are refused for lack of funding, it's not a case of outright, we don't have the money, you don't get it. There's a points-based system. Those with the most points get the funding, and then the ones that are left, it's not a case that perhaps they would have been funded had the pot been bigger, but it's just that the ones with the most priority get their full funding or their match funding. That's how we do it in order. The ones with the most points, it's not first come, first served, and the ones at the bottom of the pile don't get the money. That's not how it works. But we are going to have a full review ready for the next round of it. It could mean a little bit of extra clarity put on things, a few little tweaks here and there, but essentially the scheme works. It will continue to work in the same way, but just a few minor adjustments. Thank you.
Steve, did you want to say something, or were you just waving, pointing me at?
Yeah, it's well, exactly the same point that Natasha has made. We are picking up also what Caroline was just mentioning. We are reviewing it, so there will be tweaks to this. In the light of our operating experience, we will be tweaking this in terms of how we respond and how people have responded to, and we are going to review it.
I was wondering, I know when this was discussed, or I think we've discussed this with someone about a year or so ago, we were talking about having some follow-up on the success of the projects, and also particularly when we've had members who have applied on behalf of their communities, then actually getting, I'm not saying we do this for publicity, but actually getting something in the newspapers, getting something in the Broadland news, getting something in about the fact that Broadland District Council is doing something proactively within communities. And I mean, look at the range of things here, just jotting down, supporting allotments, village halls, boat clubs, playing fields. This is the heart of what we think life is like in a community like Broadland, that we're supporting those sorts of projects, which are fantastic. And we need to be sort of showing people about that. And in the same vein, if they're doing some building work, and I'm not suggesting that people should spend a fortune on some sort of fantastic expensive brass plate on a wall, but do we encourage people to put something up to say funded by Broadland District Council? Because again, people often say, well, what does the council do for me? and they think we empty their bins and that's all we do. And actually, when you're able to say, we do look at all these other things, it's just these little things that make people appreciate that there's something going on, which perhaps is unseen, but something worth praising the council for.
Absolutely, Chair. We very much encourage the successful applicants to acknowledge the council funding in kind of the best way. So if it is a building, is there something that they can physically put on there? There was an early decision not to take away from the funding by producing plaques to give out, and at the same time we understand that there may be organisations that there's a cheaper way to do it. So we try and give a little bit of leeway on that, hence not making it compulsory, but it is encouraged of any successful application. Equally, we very much encourage members to go and visit those groups that they've been successful in attracting funding for, taking pictures, talking to officers in the comms team so that we can help do that promotional work and encourage it along. We'd very much be keen to do that wherever it's been successful. So yeah, we'd certainly encourage it.
Has anybody else got anything they'd like to ask? Looks like we're done on this. Everyone's I think in a hurry to get home tonight. It's a lot quieter than I thought it would be. So if we look at the recommendation simply the committee has asked to comment on the current spend against the ground rules, which we have done. Therefore, we've finished that item. Thank you very much indeed. We will move on to the work programme. Thank you. Sinead, that's you.
Sorry, Chair, I was waiting for you to invite me in there. So there's a few updates to the work programme that you will see. So we've now got a date for the next milestone for the customer experience project, which we have now added to the work programme. And following your last meeting, we've also now added the annual review of the register provider performance reports. So you'll see that's been added as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, I will close the meeting at 7:18, 7:17.